Let me begin by asking you this question. It's often said that electric cars are the future of cars and that at some point they will totally phase out petrol and diesel engines. Do you think this is true or what's your opinion? Let me know in the comment section. The 2014 Nissan Leaf, it's an electric car and it's here to fight for some space in the Kenyan market. That's what we will be looking at today. Welcome to Ekevato Reviews. We will discuss all the important aspects of this vehicle that you should know before you decide to go for this car. We will also compare the running costs of an internal combustion engine to electric cars, so please stay tuned. If you find this content helpful, then please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also use the details in the description box to support the channel by donating. So this is the first generation of the Nissan Leaf that was in production from 2010 to 2017. In 2019, the second generation was the world's top-selling electric car, but in early 2020, it was overtaken by the Tesla Model 3. You can get this 2014 Nissan Leaf from around 1.2 million to around 1.6 million shillings. 2010 to 2013 models are a bit more affordable from around 850,000 to around 1.2 million. While models from 2015 and onwards are much more expensive from around 1.6 million to well over 2 million. In fact, the newer 2020 models cost up to around 4 million shillings. In terms of the comprehensive insurance, I got back 4 different quotations from different insurance companies. The highest one was around 67,000 shillings per annum. The lowest was 52,000 shillings per annum. There was also a 60,000 shillings and a 56,000 shillings quotation, but on average it's around 58,750 shillings per annum. The battery in this car is a 24 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery that has a power output of around 107 horsepower that drives the front wheels via a 1-speed fixed gear ratio. These batteries are located below the seats and rear foot space to keep the center of gravity as low as possible. Something to note about these batteries is that they don't have an active cooling mechanism. The climate in Japan and the UK, where these cars are imported from, is not as hot as here in Kenya, so there may be the chance that the climate here may compromise on the battery's lifespan, especially being that there is no active cooling for those batteries. When the batteries are 100% fully charged, they can achieve a driving range of about 140 kilometers. Now, the newer second generation has a bigger and more efficient battery that has a much longer driving range. When it comes to charging this car, there are 2 options. You can have a charging point installed at your home, which will cost you some significant amount of money, or you can as well charge it at a few places. For example, in Nairobi, there is a charging point at TRM, Thika Road Mall, another one at Two Rivers Mall, another one at The Hub, Karen, also at Sarit Center, Westlands, and finally at Holy Family Basilica, Parking Silo, CBD. The cost of charging is about 23 shillings per kilowatt hour. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I received very conflicting quotations. So if you do the quick mathematics, then it will cost about 552 shillings to charge the car fully. And as I said earlier, on a full charge, it will go on a distance of about 140 kilometers. The carb weight of this car is about 1,493 kilograms. Now, the batteries in this car can last about 10 years. So for this first generation, the lifespan of the batteries is almost the same with that of hybrid cars. Moving on to the ground clearance, it's about 159 millimeters, which is slightly below the recommended clearance of around 165 millimeters. But it's still not too bad. With 3 or 4 passengers on board, it will just be okay in the city. This is a car that is meant for city or town driving, so you won't have to worry so much about being unable to go over some bumps. So now, this being an electric car, you will wonder if there are any maintenance costs, and yes, there are, but few, because there are few moving parts in this car. There's no engine or gearbox to service, so the only things to maintain or replace due to wear and tear are the tires, brake pads, maybe the lights, and also the suspension components, of which this car actually shares its suspension components with the Nissan Juke, so its overall maintenance cost is very low. In terms of the brakes, this car gets discs all around with the front ones being ventilated. Let's quickly go through the advantages and disadvantages of these electric cars, beginning with the advantages. The first advantage is that there is instant torque or power the moment you press on the accelerator. The car will quickly zoom forward. This is especially helpful when you need to make sudden overtaking maneuvers. There is absolutely no delay, as you would maybe experience in an internal combustion engine before the transmission downshifts. Secondly, you save on fuel costs. Being an electric car, it doesn't need fuel, so the money you would use to fuel a normal car is saved or diverted to other needs. The third advantage is that being that there are very few moving parts in an electric car, there is little to no maintenance that is required, apart from replacing the tires, suspension parts, and brake pads due to tear and wear. So in essence, you also save the money you would typically use on maintenance. Lastly, these electric cars are environmental friendly. They have zero emissions, as they do not rely on fuel for any internal combustion in order to produce power. They simply use batteries to power the car. So what are the disadvantages of these electric cars? Number one is that currently here in Kenya, there are very few charging points. So for one, this makes it quite difficult to use these cars, especially on long journeys. Assuming you want to travel from Nairobi to Nakuru, that driving range of around 140 kilometers may not be enough to get you to your destination, and even if it would have been enough, you would have to stay for some time in Nakuru and wait for the car to charge again so that you can be able to go back to Nairobi. At the same time, being that the charging points are few, you may be forced to wait even longer. That is if there are other cars charging. So this mostly limits the usage of these cars to only cities and towns. If at all these cars are to be a common sight on Kenyan roads, then a lot of investment has to be put in place with regards to charging points. Secondly, the car has a very limited mileage from a fully charged battery. Definitely the battery technology has been improving, and now the new electric cars have an even longer mileage. But still, when it comes to long distance travels, these cars are not that good. They are mostly meant for city drives, but think about this: why spend over 1 million on a car that can only do city drives but not take you to up country to see your old folks? This means you may have to get another car for those long safaris. Why not just get a car that can do both? Thirdly, electric cars are generally more expensive to buy than their equivalent internal combustion engine cars. Take an example of the Nissan Note, which you can get with less than 1 million shillings, and yet it's still a spacious hatchback. Compare that to this Nissan Leaf, which costs between 1.2 to around 1.6 million for the 2014 model. When you look at it in isolation, this Nissan Leaf, being an electric car, is a bit affordable. But when you now compare it to a normal petrol car of the same category or class, you realize it's slightly expensive. Another disadvantage is the short lifespan of the batteries. Nissan says that these batteries on the Nissan Leaf can last up to around 10 years. Now, say for example, this car was manufactured in 2014 and then you import it in 2021 or 2022. The car is already 7 years old, so typically you only have around 3 years of usage before you may need to replace the batteries. Now, replacing these batteries is achingly expensive at around 700,000 shillings. So you quickly realize that to get the most fuel savings out of an electric car, it's best to buy it brand new or maybe 2 or 3 years old. That means you will have to dig deep into your pockets because an almost new Nissan Leaf will set you back at around 4 million shillings. The next disadvantage is that it takes time to charge. There are 3 levels of charging in the country currently. There is level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 takes the longest time to charge. It may take the whole night to charge. Level 2 takes about between 2 to 3 hours to charge the car fully, while level 3 is the fast charging that takes about 20 minutes, though it's not advisable to always rely on fast charging because it shortens the battery's lifespan. On a petrol or diesel car, you will only take about 5 minutes to refill the car and move on, thus saving time. The last disadvantage is a minor one. These electric cars are very silent, that pedestrians will certainly not hear the car approaching, especially in estates. So you will always find yourself having to constantly use the horn. Otherwise, you will keep catching pedestrians unaware that you are approaching. Let's now see the advantages of electric cars over hybrid cars. Electric cars have few moving parts, so there's nothing much to worry about with regards to maintenance. On the other hand, hybrid cars are complex as they have batteries, an internal combustion engine, as well as a transmission. This means a lot can go wrong because of the complexity of the many moving parts. I know this is almost beginning to sound like a lecture, but it may help someone, so let's move on to number 2. In electric cars, you save on fuel costs, while in hybrid cars, you will still have to buy fuel, however much fuel efficient the hybrid car is. The last one is that electric cars have no emissions, so they are environmental friendly, as opposed to hybrid cars that still have emissions, as they also rely on the internal combustion engine for power. Let's also look at hybrid advantages of electric vehicles. The first one is that replacing the batteries on a hybrid car is cheaper than replacing those in the electric car. The absolute most you can spend in replacing a hybrid car's battery is around 300,000 shillings. That is the most you can spend. It's becoming more affordable because now you can import the batteries at less than 100,000 shillings. So the total cost including labor may be around 200,000 shillings or less, but the most you can spend is 300,000 shillings. Compare that to replacing the electric car's battery, which can cost as much as 700,000 shillings. It's just too much. The fear is that all the fuel savings can go down the drain, and it in fact gets worse if you bought the car used. Maybe you bought it when it still had around 4 years of battery life. Definitely the fuel savings of 4 years cannot be equal to 700,000 shillings. Stay tuned because we are going to get a real world example of the calculation of fuel savings of an electric car compared to a petrol car and see if it makes any sense. Number 2, in some hybrid cars, if the batteries fail, you can still rely on the internal combustion engine even though the car will now not be as fuel efficient. On the other hand, in an electric car, once the batteries die, that car is dead. You must replace those batteries to give the car a new lease of life. Number 3, a hybrid car does not need to stop and charge. It charges as long as the car is moving. It's also known as self-charging. It also uses regenerative braking to charge up the batteries. In an electric car, you must stop and take the time to allow the car to charge. The other one is that hybrid cars have no limited mileage. Since they are self-charging, you can just drive and drive. There's no point in time you will need to stop and charge so as to renew or extend the mileage from the batteries. In an electric car, for example this Nissan Leaf, on a fully charged battery you can only go up to 140 kilometers before you will need to stop and charge again to renew the mileage. Lastly, a hybrid car does not need any charging points, while an electric car certainly needs one. You will either have to install a charging point at your home or make do with the few that are in the country currently. Before we conclude this video, let's do a real world calculation of the fuel savings in an electric car. We have an electric car on one side and a petrol car on the other side. Let's assume this petrol car does an average of around 10 kilometers per liter. Let's also assume that both cars do around 10,000 kilometers every year. Beginning with the electric car, charging 1 kilowatt hour costs around 23 shillings. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, as I received very conflicting quotations. So what about 24 kilowatt hours? That is charging the car fully to 100%. That will cost about 552 shillings. This 552 shillings will take this car for around 140 kilometers. So how much will it cost to travel 10,000 kilometers over the whole year? It will cost about 39,429 shillings. That is the amount you will spend in an entire year to do about 10,000 kilometers. Moving on to the petrol car, we said on average, let's assume the car does 10 kilometers per liter. So how many liters of fuel will be required to do 10,000 kilometers throughout the entire year? If we do that calculation, it's about 1,000 liters. Now currently 1 liter of petrol retails for about 129 shillings, if I'm not wrong. So what about 1,000 liters? We get a figure of around 129,000 shillings. That is the amount you'll spend on fuel for 1 year to cover 10,000 kilometers. So 129,000 shillings minus 39,429 shillings is equal to 89,571 shillings. That is the amount of fuel costs you will save if you use an electric car in 1 year. And remember, the petrol car will also require servicing, so the savings will even be more, but let's just focus on the fuel cost savings for now. So if you imported this car from Japan when it was maybe 5 years old, you still have 5 years of battery life remaining. If every year you save the fuel costs amounting to that 89,571 shillings, after the 5 years you will have saved 447,855 shillings. So these savings will not match up to the cost of replacing the batteries. So now you clearly see that to get the most savings out of an electric car, it really needs to either be brand new or maybe 2 or 3 years old. But the problem is that when new, these vehicles are very expensive. Now all this information is not to scare you from electric cars, but to just show that if electric cars are to gain traction in the Kenyan market, then there's still a lot that needs to be done. Yes, it will definitely take time, but in around say 10 years to come, things will be much better. These cars will have much longer mileage, they will be more affordable to buy, there will be more charging points, and most importantly, they will be more affordable alternatives with regard to the cost of battery replacements. The battery life will be much longer, and in fact there is already a program to refurbish the batteries, which will be more affordable compared to replacing them. In general, these cars are reliable compared to petrol and diesel cars because of the few moving parts. A 2015 research by Warrant Direct revealed that out of 35,000 Nissan Leafs sold, only 3 had battery failure compared to internal combustion engines that had 25 times higher engine failure. So there you have it. I hope this has helped someone to make a decision. Would you go for an electric car here in Kenya instead of a hybrid car or a petrol or diesel car? Let me know in the comment section. If you are keen on environmental conservation and also want to stand out but don't do many kilometers from home to work and back, then you can consider this electric car. Buy one that still has a lot of battery life left in it, and it will serve you just right. As I've said, as a country, we still have a long way to go before this tech can get well established. And it's not just here in Kenya, but in so many other countries around the world. It will definitely take time for people to also be receptive of this technology. There are so many people who still appreciate internal combustion engines and are not willing to forgo them in favor of electric cars. They love to hear the engine rev, they love to shift the gears, they generally love communicating with the car. So only time will tell if this new electric car technology will win their hearts. That's it for this review. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you have any inquiries, reach me via email or WhatsApp. See you in the next video.